Welcome to this episode of Intel Focus, the review series, where we dive into the world of OSINT, disinformation, and media literacy. Each episode reviews key reports and findings, including events around the world, offering in-depth analysis on topics like intelligence gathering, digital misinformation, investigative reports, and fact-checking. This podcast aims to promote ethical and responsible practices in intelligence and information sharing. Now to the podcast.
Ever get the feeling like the most compelling answers are, hidden just out of reach?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like you need some secret decoder ring or like access to some shadowy government database just to get to the good stuff,
It's a common misconception, actually.
Really?
We assume truth is buried deep, but sometimes it's hiding in plain sight.
Okay, wow, that's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And it brings us to today's deep dive, Bellingcat.
Yes.
They've been called citizen journalists, but their work uncovering global events is anything but amateur.
That's right, yeah. They've exposed war crimes, challenged official narratives, even helped bring criminals to justice.
Wow.
All using open source intelligence.
Open source intelligence. So OSINT.
OSINT, that's right.
And get this, we have not one, but two incredible pieces about them.
Oh, wow.
One takes us inside Bellingcat's world, their techniques, their impact. The other one, this is wild. It's about a brand new OSINT toolkit they've released.
Really?
Basically, giving anyone the power to become like an internet detective.
It's a game changer, no doubt. Bellingcat's always been about democratizing knowledge, and this toolkit takes it to a whole new level.
So we're talking about average people like you and me, potentially unraveling international incidents from our laptops. That's the promise here.
Absolutely. But it all started, believe it or not, with one man on his couch.
Right. Elliot Higgins.
Yeah.
Now, this wasn't some seasoned intelligence officer, was it?
Not at all.
Okay.
In the early 2010s, Higgins was captivated by the Syrian civil war. But instead of just, passively following the news, he started digging into the open source world. Satellite imagery, social media posts, even obscure technical manuals.
Hold on. Technical manuals. Was he some kind of weapons expert in a former life or something?
Not exactly. What fascinated him was the potential to actually verify what he was seeing in online videos from the conflict. By cross-referencing those videos with this publicly available information, he could identify specific weapon types, troop movements, even contradict official narratives coming from governments and news outlets.
Wait, so he's finding inconsistencies just by piecing together publicly available info.
Yeah.
That's incredible. But was anyone taking him seriously at this point?
Initially, he was dismissed by some as, just an armchair analyst. But his work, it was meticulous, rigorously documented. It started to gain traction. Remember the downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 in 2014?
Yeah, 17.
That became a turning point, both for Bellingcat and for open source investigation itself.
MH17, that was huge.
Yeah.
The world was demanding answers, but the narratives were so murky, so conflicting.
Exactly.
It was impossible to know what really happened.
And this is where Bellingcat, now a formal collective, stepped in.
Okay.
Using open source data like social media posts, satellite imagery, even the shadows in photographs to determine the time of day, they meticulously tracked the movement of a Buck missile launcher.
The Buck missile, that was the smoking gun, right? But how did they even know where to begin looking?
They started with what was known, the date, the location of the crash.
Right.
From there, they scoured social media for any mention, any image, any video that might show military equipment in the vicinity.
So they're basically digital detectives at this point, sifting through mountains of data for that one crucial clue.
Precisely. And they found it. Multiple images taken from different angles showing the Buck launcher moving through territory held by pro-Russian separatists on the day of the downing.
Wow. But it didn't stop there, did it? Didn't they actually trace it back to a specific Russian military unit?
They did.
Wow.
And that finding, later corroborated by official investigations, sent shockwaves through the international community. It was a watershed moment, demonstrating the power of open source intelligence to challenge official narratives, even those backed by powerful governments.
It's amazing to think that a group of individuals could achieve what powerful governments and intelligence agencies couldn't or wouldn't. But MH17 was just the beginning for them, right?
Absolutely. The success of that MH17 investigation, it really proved that Bellingcat wasn't a one-hit wonder.
Right.
It emboldened them, and it also inspired others to see the potential of open source investigation.
So what came next? Did they have their sights set on another, major international incident?
They actually began taking on a wider range of cases, many of which involved serious human rights abuses.
Right.
For example, remember those horrific chemical weapons attacks in Syria?
I remember those images. Absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
But those attacks were happening in a war zone, chaos everywhere. How could Bellingcat possibly hope to, untangle that?
It was incredibly complex, but they were able to analyze video footage,
Okay.
cross-referencing details like the munitions used,
Right.
even the dispersal patterns of the chemical agent with open-source information about the Syrian government's arsenal.
Wait, they could tell what type of weapon was used just by looking at, grainy footage from a war zone?
It's not always easy, but by comparing even small details from images and videos with things like, technical manuals, weapons databases, which are often available online, they can piece together incredibly precise information.
Wow.
In the case of the chemical attacks, their work was critical in proving that the Assad regime was responsible,
Right.
directly contradicting the regime's attempts to deny involvement.
It's like their work gives a voice to the voiceless, especially when powerful entities are trying to silence them. Yeah. And it wasn't just Syria, right? I remember them being involved in that terrifying case of Alexei Navalny, the Russian opposition leader.
Yeah, the poisoning of Navalny was a chilling reminder of the risks associated with this kind of work.
Yeah.
Bellingcat, using flight manifests, telecom data, and other publicly available sources, was able to identify members of the Russian FSB who they alleged were involved in the poisoning.
Didn't they actually track those agents' movements for years prior to the attack, just using open source information?
They did, yeah. And those findings forced a response from the international community.
Yeah.
The fact that a small organization could uncover what was essentially a state-sponsored assassination attempt using open source data sent a strong message.
It definitely sent chills down my spine. And it makes you realize that this isn't some, abstract game of digital detective work. These investigations have, real-world consequences.
Absolutely. And Bellingcat's commitment to shining a light on these darker corners of the world is evident in their work on even smaller scale cases.
Okay.
Like the Cameroon massacre.
Oh, right. That was a collaboration with the BBC, wasn't it? Didn't they investigate a video that had surfaced online?
Yes. A horrific video showing the killing of 2 women and 2 young children. The Cameroonian government initially dismissed it as fake news.
Wow.
But by analyzing the video, using geolocation techniques to match the terrain and vegetation to specific locations, and comparing the uniforms and equipment of the soldiers to known Cameroonian military units, Bellingcat, along with the BBC, were able to prove the video's authenticity.
Didn't they even find the exact location of the killings and identify some of the soldiers involved? I remember that being a big part of the story.
That's right, yeah. Their investigation, relying heavily on open source techniques, led to international condemnation of the Cameroonian government and ultimately to the arrest of some of the soldiers involved.
So they're not just proving what happened, they're helping bring about some sense of justice, some accountability. That's incredibly powerful. But I have to admit, I'm still struggling to wrap my head around how they do it. It seems like there must be some secret weapon.
Right.
Some super sophisticated software that gives them an edge.
There's no magic software, or at least not in the way you might imagine.
Okay.
What sets them apart is their mastery of open source intelligence.
Right.
Their ability to use information that's publicly available to anyone and turn it into something truly groundbreaking.
Okay, so we know they're using things like satellite imagery, social media posts, even obscure technical documents. But how do they even know where to start? It's like finding a needle in a digital haystack.
That's where the methodology comes in.
Right.
They've developed incredibly rigorous techniques for verifying information.
Okay.
For cross-referencing data points, for making sure that what they're seeing is actually what they think it is.
So it's not just about finding information, it's about verifying it, making sure it's credible. That makes sense. But how does the average person even begin to learn these techniques? It seems incredibly daunting.
It can seem daunting, oh yeah.
Yeah.
But that's where Bellingcat's new toolkit comes in.
Right.
Remember that second source you shared?
Yeah.
This toolkit essentially kind of demystifies their process,
Yeah.
making those techniques accessible to, well, pretty much anyone.
This is what really blew my mind. They've basically created a roadmap for anyone who wants to learn these skills, right?
Exactly, yeah. They've taken all their hard-won knowledge, the techniques they've honed over years of investigations, and distilled them into this incredible resource. It's a curated collection of tools and techniques, all explained in a way that's, clear and easy to understand.
So we're talking about things like how to analyze satellite imagery, how to, safely and ethically gather information from social media.
All of that and more, yeah. They've got guides on everything from geolocation, which is basically, using geographic data to verify the location of images and videos, to social media analysis, even how to use flight tracking data. Wow. And they're constantly updating it with new tools and case studies.
So it's not just like a static list. It's a living, breathing resource.
Exactly, yeah.
That's amazing. But even with the right tools, isn't there a risk that this kind of information could be misused? I mean, we're talking about some pretty powerful techniques here.
It's a valid concern, but Bellingcat addresses that head-on in the toolkit.
Okay.
They've built in ethical considerations for every tool and technique.
So they're not just teaching you how to use these tools, but also how to use them responsibly.
Precisely. Yeah. They emphasize things like protecting individual privacy, especially when dealing with, vulnerable populations.
Right.
And being extremely careful about how you interpret and share information, especially in the age of misinformation and disinformation.
It's like they're saying, look, these tools are powerful, but with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. And that's what's so important about what Bellingcat is doing. They're not just exposing wrongdoing, they're empowering others to do the same, ethically and responsibly.
So after this deep dive, where does this leave us? What's the key takeaway for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we're not powerless in the face of misinformation or even disinformation campaigns by powerful entities.
Right.
Bellingcat has shown that truth often leaves a digital footprint.
Okay.
It might be scattered, it might be hidden in plain sight, but with the right tools and techniques, we can find it.
So the internet might have created some of these problems, but it's also given us the tools to fight back.
Absolutely. And with resources like Bellingcat's toolkit, those tools are more accessible than ever before. We can all be more discerning consumers of information. We can hold powerful entities accountable, and we can even play a role in uncovering the truth.
It's a powerful message and a timely one. So the next time you see something online that seems off, don't just scroll past it. Ask questions, dig deeper, and remember, you have the power to be more than just a passive consumer of information. You can be an active seeker of truth. And who knows, you might even surprise yourself with what you uncover.